let this be a normal field trip? With a friend? No way!
Cruising on down Main Street, you're in. Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time.
This is a wake-up call for Republicans. America elected Joe Biden by over 7 million votes, and you're confused because you didn't see us flock to his rallies and cheer his smackdowns like we were at a pro wrestling event during a global pandemic. We don't wear matching hats or have no more malarkey flags waving from the backs of our trucks. Do you know why? Because Biden is not our tribal warlord. We believe the job of a U.S. president is to represent more than one interest group. That's why 81 million of us turned out to stop a narcissistic personality cult that embodies all 7 of the deadly sins, most of all pride, which you've taken to levels of blasphemy, claiming your political leaders are handpicked by Jesus Christ. This country is called the United States, and we have multiple converging crises that need adult supervision. But we are being distracted trying to get control over a critical mass of you.
Damn it. Hey, remember when you were unequivocally promised a $15 an hour minimum wage even though you actually deserve $27 an hour, and now you're being told that the best that they can do is $11 an hour? Get the here. When accounting for inflation, minimum wage workers were being paid $12 an hour 53 years ago. And they want to give you $11 in 2024? Meanwhile, the economy's potential for higher wage, meaning the amount of money that's been brought in through higher productivity, went up by 120% in the last 50 years. So not only are minimum wage workers making 40% less than they did, companies can afford to pay those workers 120% more than they did when they were paying them $12 an hour. The difference is that 50 years ago, the top 10% made 7 times as much as the bottom 10% and twice as much as the middle class. Today, they make 3 times as much as the middle class and 13 times as much as the bottom 10%. So if you're wondering where all that extra money went, the top 10% took it and then another 40% of your income on top of that. And if you think that raising the minimum wage will mostly affect teenagers flipping burgers, then with all due respect, you are stupid and being lied to by propaganda funded by billionaires. But I don't have enough time to explain why, so like and follow for my next video about the biggest lies you're being told about raising the minimum wage. Spoiler alert, it doesn't cause mass unemployment or inflation. Do you ever wonder why it seems like billionaires have suddenly become outrageously powerful political figures? Why Congress was able to pass a $2 trillion tax cut for the ultra-wealthy in 2 months, but they're still haggling over how many hundreds of dollars we're allowed to have during the worst economic and health nightmare in modern history? Does it seem like all of this got dramatically worse in the last decade? Well, that's because it did, and it all stems from a single Supreme Court ruling that you've probably heard of called Citizens United. About 114 years ago, they realized that letting corporations and banks spend unlimited amounts of money on political campaigns was obviously bribery. So Theodore Roosevelt passed the Tillman Act of 1907, which outlawed it. Then more laws were passed limiting donations and requiring disclosures, especially after Richard Nixon was caught getting unmarked suitcases of cash. And by 2010, the rules were that the maximum any individual was allowed to give a candidate was up to $2,700 or $5,000 if it came from an outside group. The idea being that you and any billionaire could only give $2,700 to a candidate, thereby equalizing the influence you both could potentially have in politics. But then, on January 21st, 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United that restricting donation amounts was actually a violation of free speech. Oh, and also that corporations and political groups had a right to that specific kind of free speech, but individual people did not have that same right because it could lead to corruption. And I'm going to explain exactly what that means in part 2, which is already up.
Governor Abbott woke up today and thought, what am I gonna do? Little by little, every day, my Texans are flipping blue. But they can't bring the thunder if they're 6 feet under, and I've gotta protect the right. So since the ice didn't wipe them out, well, maybe COVID still might. Dear Texas, wear a mask and beware, because Greg Abbott's trying to kill you. All we ask is take care, because Greg Abbott's trying to kill you. Greg Abbott's trying to kill you.
Have you noticed that for some reason Republicans and Democrats are arguing over whether we should get $1,000 or $1,400? As if either amount is even remotely appropriate while we're facing mass eviction and bankruptcy? Did you know that the actual amount Congress can give every single adult in America right now is $12,352? That's not a made-up number or an exaggeration, and they can do it by reversing a single bill without touching the national debt or any government programs like Medicare or Social Security. Here's how. In 2020, the US saw its worst economic growth since World War II, with record low consumer spending, which accounts for 70% of our GDP. Meanwhile, billionaires alone added $1.3 trillion to their net worth. So speaking of billionaires, remember how Congress just passed a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for the ultra-wealthy, who now, because of it, for the first time in history, pay a lower overall tax rate than the middle class? That's $2.289 trillion Congress has already approved into the national debt. And I can't think of a single goddamn reason not to take that money back and give it to the people who need it. Divided among 209 million adults, that's $10,952 per person, plus the existing $1,400, bringing our total to $12,352 each. Millionaires and billionaires don't need a tax cut, and you'd have to be an idiot not to understand that a massive influx of money and consumer spending would be unfathomably more effective than just using the money to artificially boost stock prices for companies that are firing all of us anyway.
Well, yeah, I think poor people suck too.
I don't think poor people suck.
Well, I don't know what you mean by socialism then.
Socialism? I just think that. Why do you want the government to control you?
I don't want the government to
Well,
control
that's
me.
what socialism is, isn't it?
No. I assume that you're not into unions.
No, I think unions are great.
That's what socialism is. Socialism is when the working class has power. Right now, we actually give lots of bailouts to the oil industry.
Well, that's great.
And why is that great? Because you just said socialism sucks.
Well, I just,
Is socialism when the government gives you money?
yeah, I think so.
So when the government gives corporations money to bail them out when they're failing,
I don't know.
is
they
that
weren't
socialism?
failing
Then why do governments have to give them money?
Because Biden got rid of their jobs. Are you not
No.
talking about the Keystone
Corporations have always, especially